Hello learners, and welcome to today's lesson of lines, angles and intersecting lines. Now today's focus is going to be on the practice and application questions. Let's get right to our questions. So our first practice question there says, calculate with the reasons the value of x and y. Now, before we can calculate these values, we need to look at what we have been given and see how it relates to those unknown angles that we are asked to calculate. So when I'm looking at angle x, which is what I'm asked to calculate here, I can see that it shares a common vertex with 64 degrees. Now, it doesn't only share a common vertex with 64 degrees, but it also shares a common vertex with 116 degrees and also with that unknown y. But I am going to now focus on the one that is the 64 degrees. Now, when I look at my angle x and my 64 degrees, I can see that they are on opposite sides of that common vertex. And of course, we can see that two lines are intersecting to form those two angles. Now, what does that mean for us? It means that angle x and angle 64, they are vertically opposite angles. And what do we know about vertically opposite angles? Yes, you are correct. Vertically opposite angles are equal. So now we have here x is equals to the 64 degrees, and our reason for that is to say that vertically opposite angles, we know that those vertically opposite angles are equal. And that is the reason that we are going to state over here. So vertically opposite angles are equal. So now we know that that angle there is equals to 64. Now, what about our y? So when we are looking at the angle y, again, we can see that it is opposite the common vertex with our 116 degrees. So we can easily say there that y is equals to 116 degrees. And now our reason for that can still be that it's because that they are vertically opposite. So vertically opposite angles, those vertically opposite angles are indeed equal. So that means that the value there for y is 116 degrees. And because we already mentioned that not only do they share a common vertex, when you look at angle 116 degrees and angle 64, they share a vertex and they share an arm. Now, do you remember that when they share an arm, what does it mean? It means that those two angles are adjacent to each other. And because they lie on a straight line, do you know what that means for those two angles? If you are thinking of angles on a straight line adding up to 180 degrees, then you are absolutely correct, because we can see that those two angles, they lie on the straight line, and which means that they add up to 180 degrees. But we will work with more examples like this in another question. Let's look at our next question. So here we have a straight line that we've been given, and we are told to calculate with reasons the value of y. Now remember what we said about those angles on a straight line? They share a vertex and they both lie on that straight line. We can see that they are adjacent to each other because they also share an arm. So what do we know about these two angles? We know that angle y plus angle 35 degrees is equals to 180 degrees. Now, what is our reason for saying that? We are saying this because these angles are on a straight line. So as a reason, we can write there that angles on a straight line are supplementary. Remember, supplementary means that they add up to 180 degrees. So you can either write that they are supplementary, or you can write that they add up to 180 degrees. Now, how do we solve for our unknown y? we are going to apply the additive inverse of 35, and that is going to be us now subtracting the 35 from the 180 degrees. So 180 degrees minus 35 degrees. So our answer there for y, because we will subtract 35 degrees from 180 degrees, our answer is going to be 145 degrees. And that would be the value of our y value over there. Let's look at the next question. So the next question there for number 3, we have been given calculate with reasons the value of x. Now when we are looking at the value of x, we have multiple options of how we can calculate that value of x. Firstly, we have two lines that are intersecting each other, and these two lines are forming angles. So if we look at the x with our 122 degrees, we can see that they are adjacent to each other and they lie on a straight line. So we could easily use angles on a straight line to calculate that angle x over there. But if we are looking again at that common vertex, we can see that the angle of 58 is opposite our angle of x. And that would mean that those two angles are vertically opposite each other. So that means we could also use that to solve for that. And again, when we look at the 122, they are of course on a straight line because they share a common vertex and they lie on a straight line. But let's use a different method, one that we haven't used in this lesson, to calculate that angle x. And that is angles around a point. So as we can see, these four angles, they all share a common vertex. And what do we know about angles that share a common vertex around a point? Yes, they add up to 360 degrees. So what does this mean? So it means that x plus 122 degrees plus 58 degrees plus 122 degrees, they all add up to 360 degrees. And what is the reason for this? It is that angles around a point, they add up to 360 degrees. Now, when we add 122 plus 58 plus 122, again, we will get a total of 302 degrees. And when we now apply the additive inverse of 302 degrees, we are going to have 306 degrees minus 302 degrees, and that will give us an answer of x being 58 degrees. So x here is 58 degrees, and of course when we are looking at our diagram, it agrees with our calculations because we can see that that angle x is vertically opposite to the angle of 58. So that is one of the many ways that we can use to calculate that angle. Then we have our fourth question here that says calculate with reasons the value of a. Now, when we are looking at our diagram here, you might panic a little because there are no values there, but we need a value for a. But if you look more closely to this diagram, we can see there that we have a 90-degree angle. Remember how that block represents our 90 degrees. So we know that this side of our angle, or this angle here, is a 90 degrees. Now that we have that 90 degrees, we can easily calculate the missing value of a. Now we look at the 90 degrees with our angle A. They do share a common vertex there at R, and they are on a straight line. So what does this mean? It means that that A plus that 90 degrees, they are going to add up to 180 degrees. And the reason why we say this is that angles on a straight line, we know that these angles on a straight line, they add up to 180 degrees, or they are supplementary. So that means that our A is going to be 180 degrees minus 90 degrees. And why is that? Because we are applying the additive inverse of our 90. And when we say 180 degrees minus 90, that is going to leave us with just our 90 degrees. And that is how we have calculated our angles that were unknown using those properties of our angles. Let's quickly go to an ad break and then we'll see you just now.